everyone. I'm here to talk to you guys about the importance of web accessibility and how Vue can help you create accessible applications. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Jen kind of took that lead, but I am a software engineer at Nutanix. I'm also the North Carolina chapter leader for VUECONF. Go team. I am also a board certified assistant behavior analyst. So I have 8 years of experience providing behavioral therapy for people with disabilities, and that's kind of what has driven my passion to create accessible applications today. Having that experience and having worked with people with various disabilities, I've really gotten firsthand experience with the struggles and frustrations that really come with not being able to access certain applications because they weren't built with accessibility in mind. You know, today I feel really fortunate to be one of those people that can make a difference for this population, even though it is a little bit different than what I used to do. And I want to share that I switched into development last year after being diagnosed with a really rare autoimmune disease that affects my mobility. And I was actually bedridden for a while, and that kind of gave me a push to find something that I could do while I was, you know, chilling in bed. So coding seemed like a really good transition for that. And after I found about web accessibility, it was like, you know, combining my previous field and my passion for that into this. And I feel really, really fortunate to be able to do that today and still make a difference for that population. And I really want to thank Vue and the Vue community for being so awesome and welcoming, and just, you know, having this awesome community and bringing us all together for events like these. So thank you very much. We can clap for that. All right, so what is web accessibility? Really, web accessibility is making sure that your applications are accessible for all users. And I'm going to talk about the importance of this and why it is essential for developers and organizations who wants to create really high quality applications and not exclude anyone from being able to use them. And the web is fundamentally actually designed to be used by everyone, regardless of language, location, hardware, software, or ability. And it's really up to the stakeholders to support this goal, and up to the designers and developers to work together to create accessible applications. Now let's take a look at some numbers. According to the CDC, and this was updated this year, 61 million adults in the United States live with a disability. That's 26% of the population. That's 1 in every 4 adults in America today. So that's a lot of users that you are missing out on by not catering accessible applications for those users. So let's discuss about types of disability. So when you're designing with accessibility in mind, you often hear about these disabilities. So you hear about cognitive, visual impairments, auditory, and motor impairments. And these impairments can affect how people with disabilities experience the web today. And, you know, imagine like disabilities can be permanent or temporary. So like breaking your hand and having to wear a cast for a couple of weeks, or having blurry vision after having an eye exam. So really think about how that would affect your everyday use and your experience of navigating the web today. And you also often hear about web accessibility being for people with disabilities, but that's not true. Web accessibility caters to a broader audience than that. So you have people that are new users or older users, or people with low bandwidth or bad connections, or who are using older technologies. So really, when you work with integrating accessibility into your apps, like you're improving the experience for all users across the board. So not only is accessibility the right thing to do, but there's a lot of stake for companies. By creating accessible applications, companies can drive innovation and often solve a lot of unanticipated problems. It can also enhance your company's brand by improving the positive image with your diversity and inclusion efforts. You can minimize legal risks, as more and more companies have been getting into legal problems for not creating accessible apps for their users. And you can, of course, expand your market reach as it increases your SEOs, therefore increases your potential number of users, and you can use it across many settings, and the potential use and usability of your applications are just better. Now, we've talked about the numbers for the United States, but worldwide, there's over 1 billion people living with a disability today, and they have a spending power of $6 trillion. So that is a big number for companies to care about. So now what? It's not rocket science. It can be pretty fun and easy to implement some accessibility techniques, right? So let's get into those. So you can start small. You don't have to start from scratch. You can do a lot of things to improve accessibility for any application out there. So let's go over some of those. You can create simple design. You can change the design of the content to improve accessibility. By using appropriate HTML elements, you can give the content structure of the page for screen readers to be able to use and navigate through that. And I'll show you how screen readers work in a little bit. And then you could also, there's a lot of changes that you can make to ensure that your application is accessible by a keyboard. Now, these are some basic accessibility rules that you should keep in mind when you're creating applications. Make sure that you're using meaningful text labels and alt text for your images. Make sure that you're using legible font family and font size of no smaller than 12 pixels. Make sure that any clickable areas in your applications have a minimum width of 9 millimeters, and that's across devices. And also that can include any margins that you have for those like little icons and things like that. And make sure that you're using buttons for actions and links for navigations. And of course, you should always keep color in mind and use color palettes that have a good color contrast ratio, and I'll help you give you some tools to test that as well. Now, let's talk semantic elements. Headings are actually used for content structure and creating a content structure for your applications. And by using the appropriate elements and semantic HTML, which comes with built-in functionality, you can clearly define the content on the page, which is, again, used by accessibility tools like screen readers to navigate. So they will use headings and landmarks to navigate the page. And I've shown a few examples of what semantic elements are on the side here. So you could see like the header tag or the footer and buttons and links. So make sure that you're using these across your app and not using like divs and then kind of editing them in CSS to make them look like buttons. Make sure that you're using semantic HTML so that it comes with the built-in functionalities. So here is what a good heading structure would look like. So you can start with your H1, which is the most important header, and you could go all the way down to H6, which is the least important. And you should you could nest them in the order, in the ranking order, and make sure that you're not skipping any in the process. So every piece of your, any piece of your page should have that structure. And then these are landmarks. So landmarks can really show and define the contents of your page. So you could see here we have an example that has a header, navigation, a main content, and side content, and the footer. Now, this is a table that I've created which shows some of the HTML elements that are just really good for creating that accessibility tree, and then some of the roles that go along with that. Now, you can also use ARIA roles to define some of those in your code, and I'll show you where and when to use that, but really you should aspire to always use semantic HTML elements to create this tree. So, keyboard accessibility is super important. You have to make sure that your application is accessible by a keyboard only. So I really recommend just turn off your mouse, put it away. Just try to access everything by a keyboard. And while you're doing that, there are a couple things that you should keep in mind. Number one, make sure that you always have a visible focus indicator, and that indicator is different than the selection. So if you have something selected on your page and you're trying to tap through, that focus should look different than the selection that you've already made. And of course, you want to make sure that the tabbing order is logical so that it follows the DOM order and that it's predictable to the users as they're moving through the page. And you can't change how the page tabs through your application with tab index, and I will show you an example of that, but you have to be very careful with this as if when you use this incorrectly, it can actually ruin the experience for some users. Okay guys, so let's play around with some accessibility with Vue. So I've created this application. Okay, I've created this application and it kind of looks like a skeleton of what a page would look like. So we have a header, navigation with some links, then we have a main content with some headers, and an aside with an awesome, little tag there, and then some links and a search bar. So I'm actually going to show you what this looks like with, and I'm using the Vue Dev tools. So I'm not running this in production, so I'm able to use that. And then if you have that installed, you can just open it up like this. And I just want to show you, so this will show you all the components. I have a header, I have a nav, which has some router links. Then I have the layout, which is holding my main component and a side, and then I have my footer at the bottom. So this really shows you how you can use Vue to kind of break down little pieces of your application and make sure that they're accessible. And as you reuse them throughout your application, you know that that has the accessibility that you need built in. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a step back, and I wanna show you guys how screen readers will look at this and why it's important to kind of have this structure. So I'm using a Mac, so Macs come with a built-in screen reader that you guys all have access to, and you could turn it on with Command F5. If you're using Windows, you can download NVIDIA for free. It's a free screen reader. So I'm just gonna go ahead and turn it on. I have it muted, but you guys can see what's being read by the screen reader in this little box right here. Okay, so I'm actually going to show you guys a rotor tool, which is built into some screen readers. And for this one, you can do Control, Option, and the letter U to open it up. And you can see that we have a section called Landmarks, and I'm just gonna, arrow key to the right and show you like all the options that you have with this rotor tool. I'm gonna stop at headings. And you see now if I kind of scroll down, you see some stuff being highlighted on the page. So 1 is for header 1, so I have header, the navigation, main, header 3, 4, 4, and 5. And then I have an aside section. So you guys can see how headings are used by some screen readers to kind of jump across the page to like important pieces or titles on your site. And I'm gonna go back and jump to the landmarks. So in the landmarks, you see that we have a banner, navigation, we have main, complementary. I'll show you how I created this, and then I have content info for the footer. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off really quick, and I wanna go back to my slides, and I wanna go back to this table right here. So you've seen the first 5 things. So we have a header on our application, a nav, main, footer, and a side. Now I wanna show you guys something on my code, and I'm gonna make sure that I save this, and refresh. I'm gonna show this to you again. Yes, turn it on. So now we just have these, right? So we have main, complementary, and content info. But let's pretend that I wanted to create this surge for it to be accessible as a landmark in our screen reader. And if we go back here, you could see that there is no real HTML semantic element that could give us this functionality. However, there is an ARIA role that we can use to make this appear on the landmarks rotor tool. So if we go to our code, and right here, I'm just gonna put role, and it's gonna be search. And if I save that, make sure that I have that, yeah. So you could see now there's a search on the landmarks. So you can access that. Another thing I wanna point out is that even though right here, there is an HTML element for section, there's like a little asterisk on the role. Ooh, sorry. So what that means is that, yes, the screen reader does pick it up as a section, and I could actually show you by opening up my DevTools. And if you're using Chrome, they actually have this really cool tab right here. So right where your styles would be, and it's just accessibility. If you open that up, I'm gonna go ahead and select these links here, which are actually a section, as you can see here. And right here it says that the role is a region. So it tells you what the role of that element is. So if we go back here, yeah, we have that correct, it is a region, but it's not picking it up. So you can actually go back here, and these are my links for the section, and you could give it an ARIA label for this to be able to show up on your screen reader. So once you save that, and I'm gonna close this so you can see the rotor tool, you can see that now we have this region, and it does say region, called group of links region. So you can actually give your landmark unique names, and you could do this for everything. So for the search, you could actually add an ARIA role, and it could say an ARIA label, and it will pop up in the router tool. Ooh, let me refresh. Sometimes it's hard to refresh with this. Turning it on. Okay, so now you have like this really like descriptive search region here. And this is useful, like say you have different search bars everywhere and you want one search word to be defined for like searching resources and another one for be searching accounts and searching certain music or certain types of things. And I actually have shown you guys that this will, so I've shown you what it used to say before, and it just said role of search, and it didn't have a name. But now the ARIA label that we've defined, now it will show up in here, and that will actually become the name of the resource. So the name of that, I guess, element. So now that we know how screen readers will kind of go through the page structure, how else can we kind of automate to test if we're meeting accessibility standards? So if you're using Chrome, we actually have the Lighthouse built in. So I'm just going to choose, you can test your application for many things. There's performance, PWAs, best practices, SEOs, but I'm just going to select accessibility for the purposes of this talk. And I'm just going to run the audit. And this will kind of tell, like, it will kind of test a lot of things about our application and then come back with, you know, some little tips that we can use. And it will rate us with a score. So right now I have a 90, so it's not perfect and I want it to be perfect. So you could see here that it kind of gives you a warning of what's wrong with the page. So here it says image elements does not have an alt attribute. So if you open it up and say that you have no idea what that means, it'll actually give you a little bit of information and a link so that you could learn more about it. And if you just kind of hover over this, you see how it kind of highlights it on the page, what the element is that they're kind of referring to. And if you click it, it'll lead you back to where that element lives. So if you look down, again, I'm in the accessibility tab at the bottom, you see that the role is an image, but yes, I don't have an alt text defined. So let's go back to the code. So here's where it is. I'm actually just going to copy this because I'm a terrible speller. And then you could see that there it is, it updated. So if I'm just gonna go ahead and run the audit really quick so you guys can see. And it should be at 100. Yeah, and this is a really good tool, even just to learn about accessibility, because it does give you a lot of great resources. So you see that now we're at 100%, and actually I wanna show you, before I move on, that you can, so you see how it says like name, then ARIA label by ARIA label and alt tags. This is kind of like a hierarchy of what screen readers will prioritize. So if you have a title, it will be overwritten by the alt text if you have alt text, and the alt text will be overwritten by ARIA label and so on. So let's go back and give our image an ARIA label just to show you what happens with that. So if I save that, all right, let's refresh. Okay, so you see that it kind of like crossed it off, and now this is the new name for that. You see how, ooh, no, the name changed. So that's, like, if you have weird things happening with your applications and you're like, I don't understand why things change, just look at this accessibility tab, make sure that you are setting the correct properties that you want to show up, and that's where you can check for that. Okay, so another thing that the audit tool will tell you is that there are some things that you still have to manually check, like the logical tabbing order or making sure that you have a focusable item as you tab through. So let's go ahead and test that. So I'm just going to tab through. So you see the home popping up, page, form, yeah. We have links. So any elements that have that functionality will kind of be tabbed through. But let's pretend that I wanted to make this main here or something in here be tabbable, I guess. So you can actually use tab indexing, and let's see, I have it right here. So you can actually give it a tab index of 0, and I'm going to do it to the main. And what this will do is it will add it in the same order that it's in the DOM, and it will just add it to that order. So right here, we should be able to tap through it. What is happening? Okay. Oh my God. I don't know what's wrong, guys. Okay, I'm just gonna turn off the screen reader because we're not gonna use it now, but okay, so I'm just gonna tap through so we see the same links that were popping up before, and now we can access the main, and you can keep going. And now, let's stop here a second. So these links have always been tabbable, so you can always tap through the links, but what if I just wanted one link to just not be accessible through the keyboard? You can do so by giving it an index. So let's see what happens when I do something like, well, this one. So you see how it kind of skips that link? So it will kind of take it off that rotation, and you won't really be able to access it. And look, I will go around the page. It will kind of even come off the page and up to the URL link. So let's say you cannot tap through that anymore. Let's say that I actually give it a value of 1. So that will actually be the first thing that you tap through. So you see, and then it goes back to the DOM order. Again, I just want to show you this for demonstration purposes, but you have to be really careful in how you use this because you can actually break your application while you're doing this for a lot of screen readers and keyboard users. So just read up on the documentation. Okay, another thing I want to show you is there are a lot of tools that you can use to kind of simulate certain things. And I have this one installed called Oracle Color. I have a link for it. And I can actually turn it on with F5. So I'm gonna just toggle through it, and I hope you guys can see that, but it will kind of toggle through different color blindness. I don't know if you guys can see that color difference, but it'll kind of give you an example of what your application would look like for people with this color blindness, and that's super, super important. Another thing I wanna show you is how to test for color. So let's go to our code, and I'm actually going to make that header instead of white. I'm gonna change it to purple because why not? So that's not very pretty. I'm sure some of you can't even see that. So I'm going to show you this by running another audit because, yeah. So I want you guys to see that any little change can be picked up by this audit, and it'll tell you where to fix it. So again, it probably gave me bad score. Oh yeah, and I've changed some stuff with the order, and you know, they don't like that you have a tab index greater than 0, which is great practice not to do. But it tells me that this H1 right here is not meeting color contrast. So if you click it, it'll lead you immediately to that, and I actually am going to go to the styles. So you see here, you can see the color. If you click on it, it tells you the contrast ratio. So right now, with the purple, I have a score of 1.6, kind of. And if you click on show more right here, it'll actually show you a little breakdown of AA and AAA. Now, these are some of the criteria that you can meet AA standards or AAA standards. You should always have AA standards at the very least, but you should shoot for AAA. And these are the scores that you need for those. So, and you see on the color chart on top, now we have 2 lines going across. And I'll show you what that means as I move my little color picker around. So you can see that my score is changing. And you can see that as soon as I go up above one of the lines, I'm now meeting AA standards. And I'm just gonna keep testing out. And if I go across the second line, I am now meeting the AAA standards. So this is just really neat tool that I often use to make sure that I'm meeting accessibility. Now, there are a lot of other tools that you can use outside of Chrome DevTools, but I figured this is something that a lot of people have access to, and it's just really neat that they did this. So yeah. Another thing I want to show you guys is if you are running this in production, as I am in this page, so I'm using Netlify to run this, you can use, Vue makes it really, really easy for you to include PWAs, which are progressive web applications. And you could do something like Vue, add PWA, and you have access to this, and it'll create a manifest. Hold on. Oh, that's an application. Okay. And it will create this manifest file right here in public. I'm just going to find it really quick. And this will kind of tell the application, it will tell the browser a lot of details about your application so that it could run it offline or install it and stuff like that. So I'm actually going to show you that with this, I can install my application in your desktop, and I believe it's this one. Nope, this one. Yep, and it will run as an application on my desktop. And I have access to everything, and this is what a real page would look like with this layout. And then I also want to show you how you could create accessible forms using Vue. Oh, let me turn on my screen reader so you guys can see you guys can read what the screen reader is saying as I tap through. So, okay, let's see. Hold on, maybe I have to restart. No, oh yeah, okay, I'll do it from here. So we have, oh yeah, of course. Okay. All right, so here we go. And then we have, this isn't working. Well, but so it will really read, and if I open up this tools here, you can see that it should read label for this. And yeah, so you can kind of tap through everything, choose everything with completely by keyboard. I can choose something with this, like arrow keys. I can drop down and select something like this. And my favorite color is cornflower blue because why not? And you can submit. So Vue makes it really easy, and I actually have these as components, and you can reuse these components now that they are accessible. And say that you've already created a checkbox that's accessible, you could reuse it and pass different data to change the values of things. But again, it's really simple. Vue really provides a way to build in accessibility to a lot of your pieces and then just reuse them across your application without having to think about like, oh, is that accessible? So it's just really, really good. And again, something I'm not going to talk about today, but something to look into if you're using things like Modo, which somebody mentioned earlier, and things like that. There are ways to alert a user for those things. You could use Area Live, and it'll kind of alert certain users or interrupt certain behaviors to alert a user of a warning or something that has gone wrong with the page. Yeah, but I have, let me see, going back to my slides. So I have created a list of resources for you. No. Okay, sorry, trying to turn off the screen reader. I've created a list of resources for you. This is a really good color contrast checker that you should use as you are designing your application too. I really recommend, accessibility really starts at the beginning. It starts with design and the color palettes and making sure that you're doing mobile first. You could even do offline first, as PWAs allows things like service workers. And if you know how to use service worker, you can add a lot of functionality and make sure that your application runs completely offline, which is great. And Chrome has an extension called Chromebox, which is a really cool screen reader. Even if you guys have a Mac, I really recommend you guys download it and using it because it's really interesting. There are some differences between screen readers, and it's always good to just at least have two to play around with. And then I linked an article about using ARIA and ARIA roles, states, and properties, which is really cool. If you guys want access to these slides, I'm gonna leave this up for a little bit. Let's take pictures. And again, if you guys have any questions, you could find me at, that's my Twitter handle. And yeah, I'll answer any questions you guys have there. All right, thank you guys so much for having me.